Do you want to design cross-stitch patterns? Are you curious to see how someone else designs a cross-stitch pattern? Do you not care about cross-stitch patterns at all, and you're only watching this because I made you feel guilty about supporting your friend's stupid new YouTube channel? Well, this completely unqualified hobbyist designer is here to answer all of your questions. Cross-stitch was long considered an old lady craft, and let's be honest here, that was not entirely unfair. Available patterns tended to be cutesy or floral or both, and it's only relatively recently that we've been blessed with a wider range of choices. Nowadays we have access to patterns of every style, size and subject matter imaginable, making the craft as a whole more appealing to a diverse range of people. And of course, we've got indie designers to thank for this. As a hobbyist, the barrier to entry for designing and self-publishing your own cross-stitch patterns is as low now as it has ever been. You can even get through the entire process for free depending on your approach. So let's start at the start and see how the whole thing works. First, we need an idea. For this video, I'll be talking about my most recently released pattern, which was inspired by something extremely self-help sounding, so stay with me here. Core values. If you're not familiar, briefly, core values are a set of things that are most important to you, and making decisions that align with those values is the path to living a happy and fulfilled life. So the theory goes. Whether you believe that or not, it works a treat for me, and my number one top spot cannot live without core value, freedom. So that was the inspiration for this design. I thought about where I felt most free, and kept coming back to certain places that we've travelled over the years. Now, obviously most of us feel a sense of freedom on holiday, because we're freed from the crushing obligations of the rest of our lives. Looking a little bit deeper, I found that certain landscapes tend to fill me with what I can only describe as a feeling of being alive and limitless. So I decided to base my pattern on what I love about these landscapes in particular, and you may notice a running theme here, but I notice that what I seem to enjoy most are vast empty distances and, of course, mountains. So, vague concept settled. Now, step 2 in the process is obviously take a bubble bath. I always sort through ideas better in a bubble bath. Highly recommended creative life hack right there. Once I have a rough mental image of what I'm going for, then it's time to choose my tools. There are a few ways you can go here. You could sketch your design first in a notepad, draw it on graph paper with coloured pencils, use specialised cross-stitch design software, or any combination of the above. Personally, I go straight for Photoshop, which is not the natural choice for something like this, but it works for me because I'm so used to it and I've got my workflow nailed down. It's all about finding your own best process, so experiment. WinStitch and PC Stitch both offer free trials, so there's no harm in trying them out, and more recently a range of free browser-based tools have emerged too. All of this software is slightly different, but in terms of the absolute basics, they pretty much just work the same way. So try them, see what you like, see what you don't like. There are no wrong choices. The initial draft design usually takes me a few days for a small pattern like this. I iterate on the fly, scrap things, start over, and generally just make it up as I go along. Not the most efficient process, perhaps, but again it works for me. Plus I'm usually bopping around in my chair to some Eurovision banger or another, and you know what they say about time flying when you're having fun. Since I'm essentially creating pixel art, this first stage is done at single pixel size. However, being Photoshop, I can easily scale that up and run it through my custom-made cross-stitch preview action to create a rough and ready mock-up. At this point, it might become clear that there's a fatal flaw and further tweaks need to be made before going any further. Or it might look just as I imagined, and then it's time for the sample stitch. Now, okay, this bit might be a little controversial. A lot of designers choose to use a mock-up, like the one we've just seen, as their final product image. There are a lot of advantages to this approach, primarily and most obviously the time saving, and it lets designers put out patterns more quickly. This builds up their catalogue, it means buyers are more likely to stumble across them in search, there are a ton of advantages for the designer. Other designers prefer to complete a sample stitch for the pattern, and that's the camp that I find myself in currently. As a naturally anxious person, it's very important to me that I know for sure the colours I've suggested in a pattern do work as intended in real life, even if it means taking an extra month on every pattern. Yes, I am an extremely slow stitcher. It's possible to hire out this part to a test stitcher, but that's not something I've dabbled in myself. Maybe one day I'll come back with a follow-up to this video talking about that whole process. But in the meantime, it's just little old me stitching constantly in every nook and cranny of the day. Good times. Anyway, once the sample is complete, it's time to move on to the most exciting part. Admin! Oh no, sorry, I meant the worst part, by far. Photography, post-processing, populating and testing the pattern PDF, second-guessing the listing copy and rewriting it 7 times until it sounds somewhere suitably in the middle of me and normal human person, filling in the Etsy listing, preparing promo images and text for Pinterest and Instagram, realizing I should have made a TikTok and then trying to quickly cobble something together from the footage I used in this video. Yeah, admin phase is a whole thing. Once that's over though, we come to the actual worst part, showing random strangers your creative work. Is that just me? I feel like it applies to a lot of creatives. Tell me that's not just me. So by this point, you're probably at least mildly curious about the outcome of all of this nonsense. Before we move on to that, it is my solemn duty as a YouTuber to awkwardly insert calls to action into every video in the most uncomfortable way possible. So here goes. Hey, you! Do you like crafts and craft-related things? You should probably subscribe! Also, if you could take like half a second to like this video, that would be mint. Thanks. Alright, back to it. Here is the completed sample stitch. Frogged twice and redone as I kept changing my mind about the colours. Remember, I at no point claimed to be efficient. The Etsy listing looks like a real pattern made by someone who knows what she's doing, which is always a shock to me. And people on Instagram were, as always, very nice about me dropping in a self-promo post on an otherwise personal craft feed. So professional. If you happen to like this pattern, you can grab it on Etsy for 25% off with the promo code which is on screen now. If you hate the pattern, well, that's okay too, because I love it and look how great it is on a craft shelf. That about wraps it up. It's time for me to start this whole process again with my next design, which is currently stuck in the concept stage, but I can feel that a breakthrough is coming soon. And thus the cycle continues. I will be back next week with a video all about Okay, it turns out at the time of filming, I have no idea where this video is going to land in the running order, but it will be craft related, that's for sure. Until then, have a brilliant day, keep making cool stuff. Bye!